Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. I don't know why, but I can't help but feel like I have some unfinished business that I need to take care of. Let's just start with this.
Sonic Advance, when you give people what they want and they just completely forget about it. Yeah, everyone already knows the whole spiel about Sonic going 3D. Hell, I already discussed it when I talked about Sonic Adventure, and when Sonic Mania came out, it was a huge deal that it was a new 2D Sonic game, as if no other 2D Sonic games have been released since Sonic & Knuckles. Now, a lot of them were just random side games or 8-bit conversions of the Genesis titles for the Master System, Game Gear, or frickin' Neo Geo Pocket Color, but there were some that were meant to be mainline Sonic titles, or at least be a semi-prominent release in the series, and Sonic Advance was the first example of that. So despite everyone saying that the Sonic franchise went through a ton of rough patches with the whole 3D thing, there was a proper 2D Sonic game right here the whole time. Came out the same year as Sonic Adventure 2 and everything. In fact, it should be a really big deal since it was the first original Sonic game released on a Nintendo platform. Since Sega was having financial issues in 2001 due to the Dreamcast underperforming, they decided to shift focus to third-party publishing, with the two main systems they wanted to focus on being the PS2 for consoles and the Game Boy Advance for handhelds, since those were the two most popular systems at the time. Sonic Team initially came up with the idea to create an original Sonic game called Sonic the Hedgehog Advance, though this was later shortened to just Sonic Advance. Though they were understaffed in terms of people familiar with the GBA's hardware. So a team of developers were formed that was mainly composed of DIMPS, a studio funded by Sega and formed by developers who worked on Neo Geo Pocket Color games, including Sonic Pocket Adventure, with some assistance from Sonic Team, Sony, and even Bandai. The developers decided to return to the original style of Sonic seen on the Sega Genesis, though some elements from the adventure games were included, mainly the updated character designs. The game was first unveiled on January 30th, 2001, and a demo was shown off at E3 later that year. And what's interesting is that while Sega published the game in Japan, it was co-published by THQ in North America. Sonic Advance was released in Japan on December 20th, 2001, the same day as Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, and it came to North America on February 3rd, 2002, and Europe on March 8th, though there was also an N-Gage port titled Sonic N developed by Gameloft, but there are very few people who give a crap about this phone-shaped taco, so we're gonna be ignoring it. The game was a pretty big hit, managing to sell 1.5 million copies, and reception was quite positive at the time, though people don't really talk about this game that much anymore, aside from some of the people who grew up with it, which, like I said, is kinda weird, since everyone seems to prefer 2D Sonic to 3D Sonic, yet when we still had 2D Sonic, no one really paid attention to it. When looking over the whole series, people just jump right from Adventure 2 to Heroes, despite this technically coming in between. Though it did manage to get 2 sequels, so there obviously was some audience for it.
I played a little bit of this game before, but didn't quite finish it, though I do remember enjoying most of what I played, so is there a reason people tend to ignore this game when they look over the whole series, or is it just a side effect of releasing on a handheld instead of a home console? Well, let's take a look.
The story as displayed in the intro is that Dr. Eggman is up to no good, so Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy set out to stop him. That's it. Yeah, there is basically no story in this game whatsoever. Even the Genesis games had some background, but here it's just stop Eggman. I mean, that's technically all you really need, but still. The game acts like a continuation of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where you're free to select any character you want, though they all go through the same stages. Graphically, the game looks really competent for the GBA. The character sprites and backgrounds are pretty solid, though some of the animations are a little messy, especially Sonic's legs when he's running around. Yikes, but the rest of it looks good. And the music is fine, though surprisingly generic. Like, it's pleasant to listen to, but none of these themes really go hand in hand with the stages, which is not something I thought I would say for a Sonic game. Now I guess I'll take it over secret rings of stuff being drilled into my head against my will. The gameplay goes back to the 2D formula of the Genesis game, since full 3D wasn't possible on a device like this. You want to run through the stage as fast as possible while grabbing rings for your health. We had some of the staple items like ring boxes, lives, and shields, with the electric shield even coming back, though it only draws in rings like in Sonic Adventure. There's also these question mark boxes that just give you a random number of rings. We have 4 playable characters this time rather than just the original 3. Sonic is largely the same as he was in the Genesis titles. He's the fastest character, he can roll into a ball to gain speed, he has the insta-shield from Sonic 3, and he can do the spin dash, which you can now mash the button for added power. You could technically do this in the older games, but it was barely noticeable. Here, it is a lot more prominent, and sometimes required to progress. The only new things Sonic can do are grind on rails and do this tiny somersault attack that is not helpful at all. Tails can once again fly, swim, do the spin dash, though not as quickly, and he even has his tail swipe attack from Sonic Adventure, which is a nice bonus. Knuckles can still glide and climb walls, he can punch enemies now, he also has the roll and spin, and his jump isn't as low as it was on the Genesis. But this game was the first time that Amy was playable in a 2D Sonic game, and she's unfortunately my least favorite character. All she can do is use her hammer to attack enemies, and when I say all, I really mean it. She can't spin dash, she can't roll, she can't even jump on enemies. If you want to kill something, you have to use her hammer, which wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't so delayed when standing still, or you didn't have to time it just right when jumping. Now the hammer can be helpful, especially against certain boss fights, but I really wish this wasn't her only method of attacking. If you crouch, all she does is do the short hop or a high jump, which is a problem because some levels are literally designed for the spin dash, which means there are some levels levels that are infinitely more frustrating than they should be with her. Seriously, why can she not roll into a ball? She's a freaking hedgehog! She should be the only one besides Sonic who can do that. This doesn't make any sense.
Like with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the multiple playable characters really help in giving this game more replay value rather than feeling like a needless gimmick, which it very much benefits from because without those, this game would be insanely short.
There's only 7 zones in the entire game, and the vast majority of them are repeated themes we saw on the Genesis and even on the Dreamcast. This game doesn't really add anything, aside from quite a large amount of garbage. Yet Sonic advances some of the worst difficulty spikes I've ever seen in a game, emphasis on spikes. Because the first 3 zones of this game are ridiculously easy, but once you reach the 4th, it becomes insanely frustrating. Not only with some stupidly picky boss fights that can be really easy to mess up, but it frequently throws all kinds of traps and hazards that you can't see coming, like bottomless pits, spikes that pop up out of nowhere, and enemies that are just out of frame. Plus, the hit detection can be kinda wonky, and the knockback is often deliberately cheap. Now, if you get a game over, you just need to start the beginning of the act wrong, but this can be really annoying and waste a large portion of your time. Since if you know what you're doing, you can beat every zone in this game in like an hour, but that's assuming you can deal with all the bullcrap. You start with Neo Green Hill Zone. They're not even trying to be subtle. Now, despite the name, it's actually a beach level, which is closer to Sonic Adventure. I mean, there's some green in here, but still, at least playing on it is fairly decent. Secret Base Zone. You infiltrate the base via zip lines, and these are kind of fun. Plus, it introduces these things that bounce you higher and higher, and ropes that spin you around. Casino Paradise Zone. Okay, you guys better hope to God that Sega doesn't sue you for plagiarism. Yeah, this is pretty much a fusion of the casino carnival levels from Sonic 2 and 3. The bumpers, the pinball flippers, the train platforms, the tubes. I mean, it's fine, but completely unoriginal. Ice Mountain Zone may seem like an ice level, but it's also a melted ice level, in other words, water, which makes it really annoying. Angel Island Zone. I'm just gonna assume this is supposed to be the same place as in Sonic 3. I mean, it has the same name, it looks nearly identical, it has some similar obstacles, like these wheels you run on to move forward. Maybe this could have been elaborated on if the game felt like having a story. Also, this part killed me an embarrassingly large amount of times. Egg Rocket Zone has you infiltrate Eggman's rocket, and you need to keep climbing to higher sections before the time limit runs out. This level is huge and goes on for ages, especially with how vertical it is and how many annoying hazards you have to deal with. Conveyor belts, springs, pits, and an absurd amount of spikes. I spent ages on this level with Sonic and Amy. Though that's only Act 1. Act 2 is called Cosmic Angel Zone, and I have no idea why they considered both of these Zone 6, but whatever. Again, there's a lot of spikes and some weird anti-gravity stuff, plus these things that shoot you, much like Oil Ocean Zone from Sonic 2. But it's honestly not that hard. I could beat the whole thing without dying once, assuming the spikes cooperate. And finally, there's X Zone, which is just a few bosses.
But also, like with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, there's an extra zone at the very end which holds the true ending, and in order to reach it, you not only have to beat the game with all 4 characters, but you also have to collect the Chaos Emeralds. Which is easily the worst thing about this game, and it's not even close.
In order to reach the special stages, you need to find one of these blue springs and jump on it. Sounds simple, right? Well, each emerald is tied to a specific zone this time, so you have to get to each one via a certain spring, and each zone only has 1 spring across both acts, except for Ice Mountain Zone, which has 2, and they lead to different bonus levels. So if you can't find the spring, you have to come back later, and you only get 1 shot, so when you fail, you have to move on, die to try again, or reset the game if you're out of lives. And you're gonna fail, because these special stages are almost as bad as the ones in Sonic Heroes. You're in a pseudo 3D stage, similar to the half-pipe or blue spheres, but you're on a surfboard and fly around to grab rings while avoiding mines. There are a multitude of problems with these stages, but the most obvious is the fact that the depth perception in here is abysmal. It is nearly impossible to tell how close you are to a group of rings, so lining yourself up with them is a nightmare. You have to be painfully precise in order to grab these things. If you push the A button, you rocket forward, which can help avoid mines, and if you push the B button, you'll spin around, which makes your hitbox larger, letting you grab more rings. You can also do that in these glowing orbs to get bonus rings, but you have to hit it at the exact moment you touch them or else it doesn't work. I failed so many attempts because I just could not get the timing right on these things. And what's even worse are these springs that bounce you forward along a line of rings, but only if you approach them from the perfect angle. Getting the Chaos Emeralds in this game is exhausting. It's not quite as bad as Sonic Heroes since there's less time between attempts and the control is slightly better, but I still hated getting these things. And you don't even get Super Sonic, it just unlocks the final boss like in the 3 games. Oh, come on, really? You make me go through all this crap just for an extra boss and no fun, powerful form? Give me a freaking break. Now, thankfully, the Chaos Emeralds are shared among all 4 characters, so you only need to get them once, but this still sucks.
I seriously spent like 2 to 3 hours trying to get all these oversized pieces of jewelry. I freaking hated it, and it was a giant waste of my time. These special stages could seriously just make like a tree and piss off. Oh, wait. Trees normally get pissed on.
As for the boss fights, they're all once again Eggman in some kind of contraption, with one exception. Neo Green Hill, he drives in a car with this moving hammer. Secret Base, he's in one of those spring popper toys that just bounces up and down. Carnival Paradise, he flies in and out of these party poppers, along with a decoy that's covered in spikes. Just stay on the ground and duck if that one comes near you. Ice Mountain is easily the most annoying because of how cheap it is. The entire thing is submerged in water, and he knocks these icicles down, which you then have to use as platforms. You not only have to do this to hit him, but you also have to jump in and out of the water to prevent yourself from drowning. And this is what makes it so annoying, since if you time it slightly wrong, which is very easy to do because of how slow you move, you don't get up, and if you take damage if you touch the bottom of the icicle. I absolutely hated this boss, though thankfully it's easier with the characters that aren't Sonic. Angel Island just has you fight a robot version of Knuckles, which is identical to a Sonic and Knuckles fight. At least until the end where he goes silver and starts shooting missiles. Hey, I'm just glad Eggman branched out to building other robot manuals instead of a fourth robot Sonic. Cosmic Angel Zone is another awful fight since Eggman is on this weird string of balls with spikes on the end of his capsule. You need to jump to flip the capsule around and then hit him while avoiding these laser blasts. But the blasts happen at complete random, and sometimes it's impossible to avoid getting hit. And what's also random is whenever he decides to flip around again. Genuinely, how was I supposed to avoid that? But the worst part is that if you take damage, it's really hard to get any of your rings back, so you can only make a couple of mistakes or you're screwed. When I was Sonic, I spent over 20 minutes replaying this level over and over again just because I kept dying on this stupid boss. It sucks. An X Zone opens with a recreation of the first boss from Sonic 1 and 2, which is cute, and then you have to fight him in this small thing. He spins spikes around and you can only hurt him when he lowers them, but then you have to react in the exact right time to avoid his attacks. This laser, a robot hand that shakes you around, these orbs that hit you perfectly, or he just moves to the other side. You either have to have the reflexes of a freaking ninja, or just charge in, attacking as much as possible and hope you get lucky. This is another fight that totally sucked. Once you beat him, the base explodes and you fall down where Sonic catches you in the tornado, or Tails if you're playing as Sonic. You get an ending image and the credits roll, but of course that's not the real end. Once you beat the game with all 4 characters and collect the Chaos Emeralds, you have to fight Eggman as Sonic again. After his defeat, instead of the place exploding, Eggman will fly off towards the moon. Sonic will then transform into Super Sonic and take off after him, leading to the Moon Zone. Yes, that's the actual title. He's inside this giant robot and you have to fly towards him while bouncing over everything and charging into his head. But while this happens, he bombards you with as many hazards as possible. Meteors, lasers, his arms, and these robots you need to break to refill your rings. Honestly, this fight is insanely mindless. Attacks just knock you back and they come flying at you so quickly that it's nearly impossible to actually focus on anything besides hitting him or keeping your rings up. So I literally just kept throwing myself at him until I won. Once he's defeated, the other characters see a large explosion coming from space. A few days later, Tails goes searching for Sonic in the tornado and sees a sparkle glowing in the distance. So he follows it and it turns out to be his golden friend. And now we are finally done with this game.
Isn't a bad game, but it's not great either. Half the stages are decent, but the other half are really frustrating, and getting the Chaos Emeralds is not worth it. So I'm kind of split on this game. I don't necessarily regret playing it, but I don't see myself going back to it anytime soon. I'd say it's reserved for only the die-hard Sonic fans, or people who just really want something to do with their GBAs on a 10-hour car ride, because playing Frogger's Adventures 10 times can only get you so far.